I'm not a lawyer, but Fat Joe is being sued for $20 million by his former Hypeman, and the lawsuit includes allegations of trafficking, wage theft, RICO, and inappropriate conduct involving minors. And I read all 157 pages of this lawsuit, so let me break it down for you. Before I get started, it's worth noting that back in April of this year, Fat Joe sued this same hype man and the hype man's attorney for defamation. And that attorney's name is Tyrone Blackburn. And yes, you're familiar with that attorney. So in this lawsuit, the plaintiff, or the person doing the suing, is named Terrence T.A. Dixon, and he is again being represented by attorney Tyrone Blackburn. Now, the defendants in this case, or the people being sued, are Joseph Cartagena, aka Fat Joe, a man named Pistol Pete, who the suit says was Joe's primary enforcer, another man named Rich Player, who's described as Joe's business manager, the company Rock Nation, two of Fat Joe's businesses, as well as an alleged fake lawyer named Erica Morera. Apparently, she's also not a lawyer, but. So one of the first causes of action in this lawsuit, or like the legal reason for the lawsuit, is for unjust enrichment, and it's because TA says that for years he worked on and co-wrote some of Joe's music. He worked as his hype man and performed with him on the road, and instead of being paid and credited for his work, TA claims that Fat Joe, Rock Nation, and Joe's two businesses kept the money and credits for themselves. The lawsuit says that TA worked for Joe from 2005 until 2022, and while they had no formal contract, TA worked under the promise of a creative partnership and therefore co-wrote songs such as All the Way Up,
Nothing Can Stop Me, I'm All the Way Up,
Congratulations, MOBs, Ice Cream, No Problems, and Winding on Me. According to TA, after some negotiating, Fat Joe agreed to pay him 15% ownership interest in songs he contributed to, 15% of gross earnings derived from those songs, and a letter authorizing third-party platforms to pay TA royalties and publishing payments. But according to the lawsuit, while Fat Joe currently receives more than $60,000 a month in publishing royalties and $20,000 a month in streaming revenues, none of that money has ever been paid to TA. TA says Fat Joe never followed through on his promises and instead used Erica Morera, the alleged fake lawyer girl, to submit falsified and backdated split sheets. Split sheets are documents that say who worked on a song and the ownership percentage each person has on that song, completely removing TA's name and ultimately excluding him from receiving royalties, as well as making it so the public would never know about TA's contributions, which arguably has made him miss out on possible future opportunities. And then in regards to Rock Nation, the lawsuit says that since Rock Nation came on board as the management team for Fat Joe's business affairs in 2017, they knew or should have known what was going on and should have done something about it, but the lawsuit claims they did nothing and instead went along with hiding what was happening. And according to the lawsuit, the money owed to TA doesn't just stop at royalty payments. He claims that he was also not properly paid for the performances he did on the road with Fat Joe. TA claims that for his role as Joe's hype man, he was supposed to receive $3,000 per show as well as a per diem or per day amount of $100 to cover things like food, lodging, and travel-related expenses. But TA claims he also didn't receive those payments. According to the lawsuit, for the All the Way Up tour, Fat Joe received a payment of $30,000 from Live Nation, and some of that money should have gone to pay TA for his role on the tour, but according to the lawsuit, Fat Joe used that money to pay off his personal tax bill, and then later had his team tell TA's accountant to just inflate TA's W-2 to make it appear as if he was properly paid. According to the lawsuit, the amount TA was actually paid was about $250 per show, not the $3,000 he was entitled to, and it was in the form of cash, no tax documentation, and no formal financial record. And so as a result of not being paid his full amount, TA claims that life on the road with Fat Joe was hard for him. He says he had to deal with long waits in airports, unsafe hotel and overnight accommodations, and at times he would have to sleep in lobbies and public areas, while Joe, who TA says unfairly kept the money that was owed to him, treated himself and his inner circle to first-class flights, premium hotel night stays, and lavish dinners. According to the lawsuit, Fat Joe, Rock Nation, and Joe's two companies participated in fraud, theft, tax manipulation, free labor practices, and economic coercion in order to keep them making money and keep TA silent and broke. TA claims he is currently owed over $610,000 for his work on Joe's songs and his per diem rate, and that does not include the royalties he is also owed. The next cause of action in this lawsuit is for violating the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, and this essentially breaks down to claims that Fat Joe used force, violence, and coercion to get TA to work for him, also known as forced labor, and that Fat Joe also used force, violence, and coercion to get TA to participate in intimate acts, also known as trafficking. So starting with the claim of forced labor, the lawsuit claims that Fat Joe manipulated, intimidated, and threatened TA to keep him loyal and under his control. The suit says that Fat Joe would frequently tell TA, quote, "Nobody leaves Terror Squad in one piece." Oh. It says Fat Joe would constantly remind TA of people who tried or actually did leave Terror Squad and allegedly encountered violent attacks afterward. One example that the lawsuit details is of a man named Luis Cuban Link Hypeman, who was allegedly viciously attacked, permanently scarred, and publicly humiliated following his departure from Fat Joe's inner circle. The lawsuit includes a picture of Cuban Link before the alleged attack and then a picture of him after the alleged attack. According to TA, Fat Joe used examples like this to scare him and reinforce the idea that not only could TA never leave this group, but he also couldn't do anything about being forced to work without getting properly paid. According to the suit, Fat Joe would use verbal abuse, threats of violence, threats of being stranded in foreign locations, actually being stranded in foreign locations, and repeated humiliation to get TA to do what he wanted. And now on to the force, violence, and coercion used to get TA to participate in intimate acts. The lawsuit claims that during the 16 years of working for Joe, TA was routinely coerced into engaging in acts with women. The lawsuit claims that after tour stops or studio sessions, Fat Joe would bring women to hotel rooms or private gatherings and then force TA to engage with them while Joe monitored, watched, recorded, or provided explicit directions and commands. Not a freak off. The lawsuit says that TA participated in these acts solely out of fear of retaliation, and on one occasion, when TA did resist engaging with a woman, Joe canceled his flight home and left him stranded where he was without money, shelter, or support. The lawsuit says that these acts were presented as loyalty rituals to Terror Squad, and so not participating in them could result in consequences such as losing your job, your income, and your way home. In another example detailed, the lawsuit claims that after a concert overseas, Fat Joe forced TA to participate in an act with multiple people, and during it, Joe allegedly stopped what he was doing and started spanking TA, encouraging him to continue what he was doing. The lawsuit claims that TA participated in over 4,000 acts, which all meet the definition of trafficking because they were committed under fear and threat. And then the suit gets to claims involving minors. And these claims are still grouped under the violation of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act because it allegedly shows that Joe had a pattern of trafficking, and it also claims that Joe and members of his enterprise benefited from the trafficking. According to this lawsuit, TA personally witnessed Fat Joe engage in acts with children who were 15 and 16 years old at the time. The suit says the first minor was a 16-year-old Dominican girl that Fat Joe would allegedly give money and clothes to and would also pay her cell phone bill in exchange for oral actions and other intimate actions. The lawsuit details an occasion in which this minor was asking Joe to pay her phone bill, but because he was being, quote, notoriously cheap, Joe told her he was broke, and so the minor cursed and screamed until TA begged Joe to pay the bill, which was less than $100. The second minor, the suit says, was not a U.S. citizen and got involved with Fat Joe when she was 15 years old. According to the suit, Fat Joe flew her to New York and Miami on multiple occasions and paid for her to get a Brazilian butt lift. The suit notes that this minor eventually left Fat Joe and is now married to a professional athlete. Now, why did we need to know that part? The third minor, the suit claims, was a Latin female who also met Joe when she was 15, and the suit says that Fat Joe loved this girl and even contemplated leaving his wife for her. TA claims that for this woman, Fat Joe paid all of her bills, took her to his overseas tour stops, and rented a condo a few blocks away from the house he shared with his wife for the minor to stay in. The lawsuit claims that there is a recorded conversation of this third minor and her cousin describing in detail how inappropriate it was for Fat Joe to be fawning over children. TA claims that instead of being remorseful and sorry for his actions, Fat Joe instead bragged about it on a song called She's My Mama. The lyrics for that song read, quote, "Now she was only 16, I had to nurture that. Give her some growth, waited till I touched the cat. Told her she gonna have to work if she gonna get ahead. Then she drove me berserk when she gave me some lead. She told me that she learned that from the flicks. I said, Mommy, stop talking, just suck on this lick." And according to Information and Belief, the lawsuit says that the She's My Mama song was written about minor number 3, and all of these actions qualify as trafficking, and a violation of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. There's also mention of alleged grooming and graping of a 15-year-old artist named K. Rose. The lawsuit starts this section about K. Rose off with a picture of Fat Joe, Diddy, and includes Diddy's inmate number, DJ Khaled, and a man named Andre Dre Christopher Lyon. According to the suit, Andre Lyon groomed and raped 15-year-old K. Rose for about a year, and then one day as TA and Joe were walking into the studio, they heard Dre screaming that he was going to jail because K. Rose's parents found out what was happening and were threatening to report him. The lawsuit claims that in response to what Dre was saying, Fat Joe told him, quote, "I'm going to take care of it." And after that, K. Rose's career fizzled out and she was rarely heard from again. Now, the next cause of action in this lawsuit is for a civil RICO, or in other words, TA is claiming that Fat Joe had a criminal enterprise, that he used that enterprise to participate in a pattern of racketeering activities, and those activities were done with the goal of benefiting Fat Joe. The lawsuit claims that members of this enterprise included Fat Joe himself, Erica Marrera, the I'm not a lawyer but girl, Pistol Pete, Rich Player, street members known as JB, Raul, and AK, as well as Fat Joe's drivers and travel agent. The lawsuit says that the existence of this enterprise is further proven by the coded language that they all use to communicate with each other. Examples of this language includes terms like the Dern and the Don, which were used to refer to Fat Joe, Bonches, which seems to be a replacement word for the B word, Payops, which means a coerced or violent intimate act, Culpy, which means to physically assault or slap someone, Coolin, which refers to the rectum or anus, Ketchup, which refers to cutting or slashing someone, Matandin, which means to off someone, Theory, which refers to a wife, girlfriend, or mother of a child, and then Corpin, which means to put someone in a casket. Now, because a RICO violation requires members of an enterprise to commit at least 2 patterns of racketeering activities, which are specific kinds of crimes, within a 10-year period, the lawsuit lays out about 15 of these acts, including forced labor and trafficking that was done to TA, witness intimidation and retaliation, which the lawsuit says was illustrated in a recorded phone call that Pistol Pete had with a mutual friend of TA's named Percy. And according to the lawsuit, on this call, Pete tries to convince Percy to set TA up so that he could be ambushed by Fat Joe and his guys. On the recorded call, Percy tells Pete, quote, "You're trying to tell me to line the man up. That don't even make sense. I don't know who thought in their mind that I was going to do that." Pete replies, "No, I'm just saying though, if a man violates anybody, my people going to bring that person right to me. Why? A man get dealt with accordingly." Percy replies, "Yes, if it was somebody other than TA, but TA was a part of the family." In another part of that same conversation, Pete tells Percy, quote, "Listen, like I said, I only reached out to you because the way they said it, I said, well, that should be easy. If he's around Purse all the time and Purse is down with us, then that's a no-brainer." Percy replies, "Yes, but I'm not never doing that. I will bring him for a conversation, but I would never bring him for y'all to pound him out. I'm never doing that. If y'all want to catch him and pound him out, y'all can do it on your own. I'm never going to line him out like that." Pistol Pete says, "I got you," and then Percy later tells him he thinks it's disrespectful that Pete even asked him to do this because Percy isn't that type of dude. Further down in this section, there's claims of assaults on people and orders from Fat Joe to assault people, like an alleged order on rapper Mac Main. The lawsuit says that Fat Joe ordered members of his enterprise to, quote, "pound out Mac Main if they ever see him," because Mac allegedly made comments mocking Joe's marriage and claiming that he could satisfy Joe's wife better than Joe could. Then there's another alleged order by Fat Joe to assault rapper DMX. DMX? What? According to the suit, DMX got into a verbal dispute with someone close to Fat Joe, and so Joe ordered immediate retaliation on him and told TA if DMX acts up, take the hammer, which TA understood was a reference to a firearm. And then the final order from Fat Joe that's noted in this lawsuit was an alleged order to take out 50 Cent. Ciao! The lawsuit claims that this order came around 2006 or 2007, and when the plan didn't go as intended, the lawsuit claims that Fat Joe was visibly distraught and shaking. Moving on to more threats of violence towards TA, the lawsuit claims that Fat Joe and members of his enterprise used Instagram to threaten and silence TA. It says that Joe allegedly created a burner Instagram account to send TA messages like, quote, "Don't need to lift a finger, biggest in the game." And when TA responded, "You not stopping nothing," the burner replied, "Everyone's willing to do it for me." And the lawsuit says that that sentence proves the existence of Joe's enterprise and the willingness of members to commit crimes on his behalf. In some other messages, the burner tells TA, quote, "You will get dragged. Be very careful. We let you live," as well as a quote saying, "Everyone is outside," which TA took to mean he should watch his back. TA says he knows the burner account was actually Fat Joe because some of the messages he received from it referenced things that he and Joe had conversations about. For example, in one message, the burner said, quote, "You can be with whoever, but remember, everyone by themselves when they turn that corner." And TA says that this message was a reference to something Joe told him on multiple occasions, which was when they were traveling that he should never walk ahead of the group because even if you're with 30 people, the minute you turn the corner ahead of the group, you're now a party of one and you could be attacked. According to the lawsuit, TA also received messages like this from other burner accounts, which he says was actually members of Fat Joe's enterprise. In one message, an account told him they were going to give him a $150, which is a reference to slashing or cutting him. And TA says when he asked the account to prove who they were, the account responded with a video of Pistol Pete confirming it was him. Now that wasn't smart. And so that's my recap of this lawsuit and why TA is now suing Fat Joe and some others for trafficking, unjust enrichment, fraudulent concealment, fraudulent misrepresentation, and a RICO. And yes, you can sue for a civil RICO. I don't even know what to say after that, so Fat Joe denies it all, and I guess we'll see what happens.